And we convened to open session. Sorry, we're a few minutes late. And Mark, if you give us a quick recap of closed session.
Yeah, in closed session, we had an item to discuss about a stipulated agreement, and we were unanimous that that was the right move to do with the student. That's the only action we took.
Perfect. And Mr. Colby, if you lead us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we have a retirement recognition.
Okay, we ready?
Ready?
Okay. Well, I'd like to have Pat come up. Pat is retiring, and Pat is our special education secretary, and she keeps the program running. And Pat's been with us since 1996.
As difficult as it is to get special ed folks, how are we allowing her to retire?
I know.
I tried.
And
And
I'll just tell you from my personal perspective, there will be a significant reduction in the quality of snacks in your office. Pat is excellent at those and very timely.
However, there's going to be an increase in
cookies.
desserts.
But Pat does a great job, and she's my point of reference all the time because Kelly's like I am. Kelly's running all over the district. I text Kelly more than I ever talk to her probably. And Pat's the rock. She knows stuff. She's got a ton of history. I can just go over and say, is this student in the program? What are they doing? She knows who the kid is, who the parent is, and what we're doing with them. And it's a huge resource to have. And, we got a lot of work to do. We tried to get a good replacement, but we're not going to have a replacement. We're going to have somebody else because Pat's done a job that's very quality, and we appreciate that.
I appreciate that.
And we got your lifetime pass to get into things.
Ooh.
And it's nice to see your husband here walking around.
Thank you.
He had a pretty significant accident a year or so ago, and he's doing much better. So every day gets to officially be a Saturday now.
Yeah, I know about that.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Congratulations.
It's been required to support the staff, which ultimately supports the students in special ed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm celebrating Friday night
Friday night, Brook Trails Community Center, 5 or 6?
Lively.
Yeah, bourbon balls.
What time?
4:30
4:30.
until whenever.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a presentation of the 2017-18 final audit. I believe I have you guys here.
Let's have Vicki do an introduction and kind of get us rolling.
So this is John Whitehouse, who is the partner we worked with at Christie White and Associates this year, and he will be presenting our 2017-18 audit.
Good evening, thank you for having me here. We concluded our audit of the district's funds, its capital assets, long-term debt, and compliance with federal and state law. We come out twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. Our audit covers a broad range of financial areas. We test school site attendance by visiting a sample of school sites and tested ASBs there as well. We documented and tested internal controls in areas such as cash, purchasing, payroll, cash receipts. And we conducted fraud risk interviews with selected management and staff. We also conducted a single audit, which is over federal programs. And this year we tested the child nutrition cluster. We tested state compliance in areas such as attendance, instructional time, instructional materials, admin teacher ratio, and the school accountability report card. And finally, we tested all June 30, 2018 balance sheet accounts, such as cash, accounts receivable, accrued liabilities, along with revenues and expenditures across all funds. The results?
Quick question. You mentioned all these elements that you test.
Yes.
Are those state mandated, or are those, do we set those elements? Or how do you decide what you're going to test?
In terms of federal compliance, there's a determination that we do based on program thresholds. And if it's over a certain threshold, it becomes a type A program or a type B based on federal guidelines that are produced at that level. In terms of state compliance, it's a state audit guide each year, which mandates which programs that we're required to test, and that comes out annually. And then in terms of the financial statements, whatever's recorded on the balance sheet, we're testing to make sure that that is true. Whether if you guys recorded cash or accounts receivable, we're making sure that those amounts are substantiated and there's support to make sure that those are, in fact, you have that stated cash, right? And then, so those are the three main things: state compliance, federal compliance, and the financial statements as a whole.
So that list of items that you rattled out at the beginning, those are all basically required items under one of those three
Yes.
elements?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
So the numbers in the financial statements, those are responsibility of management. It's, in our opinions, we state that very clearly. And then our responsibility as auditors is to provide an opinion over those numbers and make sure that they are stated materially correct. And so the results of our audit tests are reflected in the independent auditors' reports, which there are three. One over financial statements, one over state compliance, and one over federal compliance. So we opined on all three of those, and all of those were given unmodified opinions this year, as well as in the previous years. So an unmodified opinion is one that is the best opinion you can receive, and it is what we call a clean opinion. So the district has done a great job in respect to that. However, overall, there was three findings that we noted during this year's audit. One related to the financial statements, and two related to the state awards. So I'll just kind of briefly touch base on each of those findings. So the first one was related to the ASB student body funds. And during our testing, we noted at Willits High School, 3 out of 10 cash receipts were tested. We're missing reconciling documentation and lacking a clear audit trail from beginning to end. 3 out of 10 cash disbursements tested did not have proper approval as the payee approved their own reimbursement. So we typically like to see someone else approving those. And then at, I don't know how you say it, it's like you're saying it wrong. Beckdale Grove Middle School. 3 out of 10 cash receipts tested did not have adequate supporting documentation to substantiate the amount received and deposited. And then 3 out of the 10 cash disbursements tested did not have appropriate approvals. So 2 of the 3 disbursements had the payee approve their own reimbursement.
And that would be very common in lots of districts, and we're trying to patch that up through policy and practice and how we do it. But there are so many different funds that come in and go out, and who gets this, who pays this, who put money in. It is a difficult process, but it's one we got to make sure we get cleaner.
Yeah, that would.
And we've made some headway, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, this is one element that shows up every year.
Yeah, and you're not the only district. I mean, it's very hard. I mean, if I had to pick one finding that shows up in most districts, it's ASBs, because they're decentralized, right, from the district office. So it's hard. There's a lot of people involved in trying to get everything, properly accounted for. So it's very common, and it looks like most of these are due to the small nature of the district as well. So it makes it a little bit more difficult in trying to put mitigating controls in to make sure that there's not the same person approving their own reimbursements and stuff like that. So it makes it a little bit more challenging.
It's relatively informal, but it also involves a very small amount of funds.
Yes,
All that
correct,
stuff.
correct.
And in fairness, there was no improprieties of the funding, it was just not proper documentation or signature.
Correct.
Cool, thank you.
And then, so the second one is related to state awards, and that is related to this school accountability report card. So during our testing of a representative sample of the SARCs posted online, we noted discrepancies between, the facilities inspection evaluations reported in the SARC when we compared those to the actual source document from the facility inspection tool. And it appears that inspections are not taking place annually, and which is a required element of state compliance.
And you will see in your board packet that there is now a fit for each building that's been completed.
Yes.
Saw that.
So that's already been resolved.
That was part of the reason for my question about what elements. I was kind of surprised to find, that's not the first time we've seen a discrepancy in the SARC reports, but there's nothing financial associated with that. I'm just kind of curious to know why that would even be.
Yes, that's in the state audit guide each year. How they select which areas they include each year. I mean, this one they do for whatever reason. In my own opinion, I think minor, but they, for whatever reason, want to know this information. And it's just one of the elements that we are required to report if there is something that we find discrepancy in.
So there didn't used to be a fit for each building?
Well, there hasn't been in several buildings for a while.
I see.
It's been being done by the county, and Steve didn't do every building.
He does them based on the Williams requirement, which has other timing requirements.
Right.
But we are still required to complete one for each site each year, and I think that was not known.
And it's acronym connection. You have to connect the fit to the SARC that goes to the audit and so it's a timing thing. You may very well have something structurally in your building that's broken that needs to be fixed that wasn't there when you did the fit report, but now you're doing the SARC and you go, oh, well, that's not good right now. And you can't have that. They need to be identical. So either you go back and change the fit is usually what the issue is. And so,
So that was the second finding, which was related to state awards, and this third one is another state award finding as well. So this relates to the unduplicated pupil control funding formula, and that during our testing, 5 out of 8 students tested from the CalPADS 1.18 report of the student. It's a student list report. 5 out of 8 students who were classified as English learners did not have proper supporting documentation to support that designation.
Is that a random sampling?
Yes.
and that has now become the task of Marion at the high school. She's going through all of the ELs to make sure they're documented correctly in Aries.
No,
And
unlike-
again, Aries feeds CalPADS, that feeds this, that.
So unlike the other two findings, this one has dollar amounts associated with it.
Correct.
So what does that mean?
This means that $3,513 needs to go back to the state.
It's related to our supplemental concentration grant. The unduplicated count is what drives that funding. And because we did not substantiate those students being designated as unduplicated students, we cannot keep the dollars that we received.
That makes sense. So the question I have is, this is based on a random sampling, and then you extrapolate what that would be if you had sampled the entire. So, however, now you can go back through and actually confirm, am I not correct? And find out the exact number as opposed to what would be extrapolated?
Yes, we can.
For the funds going back, it's based on this amount,
It's
correct?
based on this amount.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't make any difference to go back.
And it's based on last year's audit.
The reason we still are going to want to review that is because the way that our student system is set up, that designation will follow students. And so for our next year's count, we want to be sure we're in a good place and that all the students who are designated are appropriately designated, and then we have all the documentation so that we don't have this finding again.
Yeah, you just would want to do that before submitting that CalPADS report.
Right.
So how much has to go back to the state?
$3,513.
weren't there two of these were, I guess this would be just the one.
It may have looked, the prior year findings, I think, referred to, although that one was for free and reduced, I believe, which is also part of the unduplicated count, not the EL, but that's
Yeah.
a similar issue.
Yeah, you'll see below, you know, we have the prior, we're required to report on the prior year findings as well, so there was that.
So on that one, for the prior year,
Oh, I got 8,177.
yeah, the free and reduced, but, so when we tested for that this year, we were okay on that, so there was improvement on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions?
Basically, just give us an overview of where we're at financially.
Let's see. I'll have to go through the report again. So looking at the trend schedule, you know, a big component of, you know, a district's health is their reserve percentage. You guys have a 14% reserve percentage, which is good in today's environment. Many districts are at their minimum, which is 3%. So in that respect, it looks good. However, it has been declining over the last couple of years, which would be expected based on the rising rates for CalPERS and CalSTRS benefits. The rates keep going up and putting all districts in a tough position. So, you know, and then the budget projects, you know, at least for the general fund, a small deficit spend for 2019. So overall, I would say it looks pretty good comparatively. We have like over 150 school districts, so we see a lot.
And it's the next 2 years out that we have to.
Correct.
Are the wild card.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we can't continue the trend.
Yes, and that's going to be very difficult for most districts. So we'll see how it all, you know, pans out, especially with the new governor and how that's going to work out with the LCFF formula that Governor Brown put in. That was his thing. So, you know, are they going to keep it? Are they going to create a new formula? We're still kind of waiting on that.
The governor is supposed to put out his January budget proposal, I believe, later this week. And so next week I will be at a workshop in Sacramento to get more details about what that first proposal looks like.
Well, I just want to say that the folks got an A in accounting this year. And they had a few minor deviations, which we always do. When you can't, it's very difficult to pin the tail on every student with EL or free and reduced, and how they qualify if they're foster placed, or all those things. It's almost a non-stop documentation thing, because it changes throughout the year. So,
Can I get you to go to page 56?
Sure.
And I just need a little bit of education on how to properly read this, because there's the original, the final, the actual budgetary basis, and then the variances, and I'm kind of curious how those.
So the original budget, I mean, we're comparing the budgeted numbers, so the original budget, which is taken from, normally taken from.
That's what we approved at the beginning of the year.
Yes, and that comes from the second interim file that is provided to us. And the final is the final adopted budget, and then we're comparing the actuals for the general fund to the final to see if there's any variances, just to see kind of how the district is budgeting things. And then it shows the variance column as well.
So the final is the approved budget, the actual is what we, for example, on the very first line, the LCFF's sources, the final was what we approved, 14,493, and what we actually received was 14,643.
So final is estimated actuals,
Is that, I think so.
the one that we do with our next year's budget.
I can't remember which one was provided to us, but normally we'll take the second interim final approved budget if
Oh,
the
second interim.
if the district hasn't provided us additional
Okay.
budgets.
Okay,
So
that
we-
makes sense.
So it just depends. I mean, we have it going both ways for all of our districts.
Okay, that makes sense. Appreciate
And
it.
then the actual numbers are the actual numbers as of June 30, 2018 for the general fund.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? It takes a little while to digest this, guys.
Yeah, and if you have additional questions that come up or arise, you can, ask Nikki those, and she can filter those through to me as well, and I can directly or to her, and she can send those responses over.
That's very good, thank
And I
you.
appreciate you coming. I know that's not every district, but I like that because you present exactly what it is.
Of course.
Unqualified, you have no stake in the game, you're presenting the actual.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like that.
I mean, this is our board meeting season. We have, probably 100 board meetings to go to. So I was just over in Kernville, Bakersfield last night, so, yeah.
Put some miles on the vehicle.
Yeah, I drove up there from San Diego too, so it's about 5 hours to Kernville, and then I actually drove back last night because I had to get on a flight this morning, just because it's into Oakland and then driving up here, so.
I just don't like handing this to the board and us going through it. I think it's better when you present it to them, so thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we don't need to take any action on this, correct?
We will, item C, when we get to actions.
WTA comments.
Okay, well, it's early in the year, and there's not a lot that we need to report yet. I did want to thank Mr. Westerberg, not only for the additional support that he's gotten for elementary school teachers for unlocking the code. Super helpful, and it seems to be putting everybody in a better space for teaching that. And we have people from 4 of our school sites that have committed to going to the LCAP meetings and being part of the decision-making process. And I'm super glad that you opened that up and made it very transparent and invitational to everyone. And so, looking forward to being part of that.
Thank you. Hopefully unlocking the code makes a difference.
Yes.
We're looking forward to seeing things change. CSEA. Okay.
Hello, I'm Dan from CSEA. Sometimes we get a little redundant with all the stuff we have to talk, because everybody else gets to talk about it first. But I'd like to thank Pat Harrison again. Her, I think, 26 years was really helpful to everybody. And I'd like to pre-thank Rose Mann, because she's going to do a good job. She'll just have to grow into it a bit. I think she'll do great. Again, I'd like to, like Tessa said, LCAP, we have site reps getting involved in that too, which is great. I think it's good for people to actually get involved anyways, just so they can understand how the school district operates and works with the financials and all that. Because if more people are educated about that, it helps calm a lot of talk, and that's a good thing. And also, we're looking forward to the upcoming negotiations. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Well, a few things. One is the unlocking the code is making a difference, and I really see teachers are really vested into it. It's difficult for a teacher to reteach how you've been taught to teach people how to read. It needs to be done with fidelity, and it makes a lot of sense. It's tough for the teachers. And one of the things we're going to focus on is that I can't just leave math alone. And so I'm meeting with Tessa and some other people from Blosser, and I believe we're going to use a technology solution to put in some time at Blosser. We now, since Bechtel is 1-to-1, we freed up some equipment. We also received some donation from the hospital, who did a big technology upgrade of stuff that was only about 2 years old. And so we're going to use some of that technology to put into the classroom so we can now go through and do things. The major goal is I can't give the teachers unlocking the math code. You can't do both at the same time. But in math, our biggest issue is in grades 3-5, is patching holes where kids don't know how to do certain things. It isn't that they don't know any math, it's that this child doesn't know how to do this and this one doesn't know how to do that. And so what we're going to use is a diagnostic piece of software that they'll take an exam on, and then it'll put a program path together for them. And so the teacher's role will be basically to get them on, do their diagnostic, and it takes them through their path. And we have to do something with math, but we can't do what we've done with reading because we just can't do both at the same time. It would not be reasonable to ask the K-5 teachers to do that. So my plan is in 3-5, we use some key teachers, one at each grade level, to kind of be the lead, to show them how to do it, to get them set up on it, and get all the students set up on it. So the teacher really only has to get into the technology and let it go. But we have to address some math skills. And it's very obvious when you look at students and they struggle in math. I've had multiple of them who have come over for me if they have some behavioral issues. Occasionally they do some homeschooling work and I do it with them. Things like fractions and decimals. You know, those are things that everybody else already has. 2/3 of the class has it, but they don't. And so those are things we're going to work on. So we have a little plan in place that we're going to try and get started here at the end of the year. We also, one of the, probably the best thing that's happened, and again, I want to preface this with this is kind of like just the first rung for me, but the state has had Willits in, help me with the names, you guys will know them better than I would, differentiated assistance is what it's called now. It was program improvement, it was targeted assistance, it was, I don't know, some other name. For 12 years, the district's been in that. We just got notified from the county we are no longer as a district in that. And we are the only district around that is not in that. So all of our neighbors, Covilla, Laytonville, Bragg, Ukiah, Potter Valley, all of them are still in that. We're not in it anymore because our indicators are much better. Now, they're not great. They're not certainly where we want them to be, but our trend is we've maintained or improved. And so we're at step one. But it's a good sign and it's a good thing to let folks know that we're the only district around who's not in differentiated assistance. And we don't plan on going back there. And so I'm very pleased about that. It represents the changes that the folks have made to make it a better place. And
So essentially it shows that we are making progress.
significant. In every building. There's not one building, because it's done by building. And our entire district is not. No building in the district is.
Thank you. And I guess no small amount of thanks needs to go to the staff and the teachers for helping make all this happen. Hopefully we'll continue that trend. Thank you very much.
I just want to say, as a retired teacher, I was a volunteer in my grandson's class when he was in first grade. He's now in fourth grade. It's very hard to teach in a way that you didn't learn. It requires a tremendous amount of effort to teach others in a way that you didn't learn. And to teach Common Core math when you didn't learn through Common Core math, it's not an easy thing, and teachers have to work really hard at it, so, which they do. So.
I'm sorry I was late, but there's not been a lot at the high school. In December we had the Hot Winners Night. Hopefully you had a chance to go. It was really nice, and there were a lot of great artists. And our wrestling team just went to a tournament this weekend, and they placed first. They're doing well, and they have a tournament today here. And then our basketball teams are also doing well. The JV teams are both 3-0, and the varsity teams are doing pretty good too. That's all I have.
Thank you.
sort of this in?
Well, truthfully, I don't have too much to say this time. Since our last meeting, I've sort of been out of the country, so I don't know what's going on, except that we had a meeting and that was pretty good. I got some of my questions answered. And I look forward to the next one.
I don't have any comments.
Okay.
I had a couple of questions, but I emailed them to Mark and he answered them. Once.
No, it's not. No, and I have not said split. Moving on to any public comment on the consent agenda.
Yes, Mark, the consent agenda includes the SARCs
Right.
and Willits High School in their SARC. Item 13, they had reported that they had 6 non-teaching resource specialists. That was an error, 0. So they have corrected it. I just wanted to bring that out.
It's probably been in the SARC for a while and it's just been,
Perpetuated?
well, actually, to be fair, Jeannie found it working. She said, why is there 6 in there? I went, I don't know. And so I called Mike, he said, I didn't touch it, but it was what was in there. My guess is that they were counting special education paraprofessionals, and that's not part of the SARC. Because it says non-teaching instructional, and they assumed that it was like paraprofessionals. But a non-teaching instructional would be like teacher coaches, teacher on special assignment, those kind of things. And ours doesn't happen at the high school, so.
Larger school districts might have resource specialists that acted as a resource to other staff members that didn't actually teach. But Willits Unified is a much too small a school district. I went to that, I said,
Yeah.
there's no
Right.
way there's 6
Be nice to be in that
non-teaching
position.
teachers
I wish I
at the
could.
high school.
So entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, and then we'll talk about the issues that we want.
Thanks.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Any second?
I'll second it.
And some discussion. Paul, you had something on item
Yeah,
number 4?
part of the concerns I had for number 4 was I didn't know what some of those places do, and so part of it sounded like there were a lot of mechanic kind of issues for transportation, and I was just wondering, I know in the past there had been a discussion about how much less expensive it was to have buses sent out as opposed to having 1 or 2 mechanics work in the district.
Right.
So, I was just sort of doing some of the math, and it didn't particularly look like that. And I was curious if that's up for another study again, maybe, or what
It
goes
is.
on. Some of those numbers are pretty huge. I've seen some of our buses at the Department of Motor Vehicles a couple of times, and they sit there for an hour or so just to get okayed by the highway patrol. And, I wasn't certain that that was the very best plan, and I was just wondering how that's working out.
Well, we look at it all the time. I will tell you that there's some things you need to make sure you calculate into that. The district used to hire 2 mechanics. So that's full wages of 2 people, full benefits, plus you have to maintain a garage
Yeah.
that has oil that you have to get rid of, you have parts you have to keep on store, you have to update your equipment, all the new buses, every time we get a new vehicle, there's a new piece of software that you have to put in place to analyze what's going on. So the overhead cost of mechanics is really expensive. That's why when you go to get your car fixed, they charge you $100+ an hour for shop time. Well, they're not paying the mechanic $100 an hour. That's their overhead costs. So we don't have any overhead costs. The other issue is the buses, as they get older and get fixed, the difference is between what is their hourly rate they charge us and the price of the work they did, because the parts are the same price.
Yeah.
So overall, it's been very cost efficient for us. It's also another place where it is virtually impossible to find a certified diesel mechanic to be a mechanic for us for a couple reasons. Our pay is certainly not where it's at. I mean, when we looked at this, we tried to get every diesel mechanic in town to say, hey, would you do our butt? I'm not working for that. Well, it's a negotiated item. I can't just say, well, let's negotiate a price. On top of that, we don't have the volume, and in the summer, they have nothing to do. You know, theoretically, they should have stuff to do, but a lot of times they're doing other things besides buses. So for us, it actually has worked out well. And if we posted it tomorrow, we'd have no applicants. I mean, they're just not. Every time we post it, they call up and say, what's the top wage scale? And we tell them, they go, oh, well, no thanks.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure we have a lot of choice in that one right now.
Okay. All right, I was real curious about that. And then there is an employee that I understood is working for the district, being paid from a grant, but working in the district, and yet I continue to see them listed to be receiving a monthly check. Is that just because of the way it needs to be
Well, I'm
paid out?
assuming it's our family therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
I
so
don't-
it's just set up that way, it's not like,
I don't know how it works through us. Do we pay that monthly, weekly?
I think it's paid weekly and is based on invoice.
Right.
So
Oh, okay.
that's why this is just accounts payable. So this does not reflect payroll, this is accounts payable.
yeah, okay, that's what I thought, which is why I was so confused. So
I know that
mostly-
it's turned in as a weekly time, it's like a service that you pay.
We're
for.
on contract with.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And it's an hourly timesheet they turn in, and we pay that through accounts payable. It's not really a payroll, it's a service that we're paying for.
Oh, okay, so then it's not really being absorbed by the district when the grant ends? I mean, it's not set up on that path, just because of the way that it's paid out? I mean, it's not, what I'm asking, I guess, is so then the district's not paying it and being reimbursed?
The attendance.
Oh, yeah, so we had one that was previously on supplemental concentration grant, but we have a new grant, and so for this year, that position, this year and next year, will
For the
be,
next 2 years.
will be on.
His portion is funded through that. His-
Yeah.
His non-special education portion
Right.
Okay,
is funded through that grant.
oh, okay.
And that's why that will run through our book like that.
Yeah, I couldn't understand what it did,
Yeah.
but okay,
Yeah.
okay, good, thank
Yeah.
you.
That money comes from the county to us, not
Okay.
directly to the employee.
Well, see, that's sort of what I thought, and I didn't understand why it was pulled, you know, so to speak, instead of, but it doesn't matter, because I think I get it now. Okay, then do you want to hear my questions on 6?
Absolutely.
Okay. For 6, I had some concerns about who does the back checking, so to speak. You know, there's a list of things that need to be taken care of, and what I understood from you the other day was that all those things are taken care of. Okay, so probably most of them are. There were a couple I just happened to notice that don't seem to be taken care of. And so I was wondering, which I'm not saying is unusual, it's just, what I'm wondering is who then becomes responsible to go back and say, okay, we fixed all the things on this list. All the doors are closing properly and all the hinges are not smashing fingers, or whatever is the issue. You know?
Well, Terry and the building administrator usually, they'll
So the
look and
director of
see
maintenance becomes the person that,
if there's a deficiency on there, that's on their list, that becomes a priority item to take care of. Because we have to fix everything that's a deficiency on the bid.
okay, that's what I thought I understood. So what is the timeline? I mean, like, here's the list of things, they now become a #1 priority as opposed to a medium priority or whatever. And so you have 2 weeks, 30 days, what does that turn into?
There really isn't a timeline, it kind of depends on what it is.
Oh, okay.
If I were doing the fit for Blosser, for example,
Uh-huh,
I would put the roof at Blosser.
as a
because-
priority.
As a priority.
Uh-huh.
I know what's gonna happen if the roof keeps leaking. I
Right,
mean, we're gonna have a major issue. However, the district doesn't have $400,000 to fix it.
right.
And so it comes down to, yes, it's an issue, yes, it shows up on the fit, we know it's there, but we can't do anything about it. So most of the deviations always get taken care of. If there's a deficiency, it gets taken care of. It depends. The fit can be super detailed. It could be, again, if I were doing the fit, I would put the high school parking lot in. I mean, I have a pickup truck, and even when I go through that V,
You must feel that.
my trailer hitch will
Yeah.
straight. I mean, it's bad. But if I put it on the fit, it's not gonna get fixed, even if I put it on the fit, because it's another $400,000 bill. So the question is, do you put it on the fit and leave it as a deviation? I would do that to exemplify the fact that we need some facility help and funding. Or I don't put it on because it's pointless, it's not gonna get fixed until we have the funds to fix it. It's not like we're unaware that it's not bad. Most of the stuff that goes on the fit as a deviation that needs to get addressed immediately is something that impacts students in a classroom. Those always get fixed right away. So if it's a heat, if it's a door, if it's a safety issue, those all get done. I mean, we check
But
through the
sinks
list.
might not, because they're not real important to their
Um,
safety or anything.
Sink may be more problematic than you think.
Yeah.
Dan can probably tell you better than I can, but we have one, I'll give you an example of that right now. The art room at Bechtel. That is probably a dig it out, rip the pipe out, reinstall a whole new pipe setting to do it. And when you do it, you gotta shut the water off.
Yeah.
So what school day would you like to not have water? Never.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that art room thing, it's either tomorrow or Saturday I'll be in here. And the first step is we have to run cameras down the whole waistline system of the school to figure out where all the laterals are, to figure out where all the stuff are, because the plans are not accurate to anything that was updated. So that's a step we have to go through.
And if
Then
it-
once we figure it out, then we can plan the path on how to get pipe to pipe.
And if it were as simple as we just need to send a rotor-rooter through it, we actually have the equipment to do that. We bought rotor-rooter's old equipment.
Yeah, I heard that.
So we can do that, but when we get it down there and it doesn't go through, now we're into a big problem. Now you gotta put a camera down in there, you gotta see if you can even get through. If you can't, you have to come the other way to get at it. So, that's one of the unusual things that we have here is with some water issues. I'll give you, our district office, we had the water shut down the other day because they had to do something and they shut the water down all over at Blosser over Christmas break. Because they had to make a fix to the plumbing, and let's just say they did not put too many shut-off valves in.
I know. Okay.
And by the way, that is something we fix. When we go into places like the pool has about 2 or 3 more shut-offs than it's ever had before, because when we go in there, we put shut-offs in because our chances of coming back are pretty high. But, yeah. Yeah. And the fit reports, some of them are in pen and some of those things.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I want to get a better process. I would like the same person to do the fits. I would really
Yeah.
like Steve from the county to come up and do our fits. Even if I had to pay for the service, I might want him to do it because it would be consistent. It would also be in line with what happens in other districts.
Yeah. that would
Right
make
now, sending an admin out to do it, our admin really aren't maintenance custodial minded. They're classroom instructional oriented. And this is really more of a nuts and bolts operational thing. And I don't want us to just do it. I don't want Terry to do it. I want it to be an outside person, just like the auditor. I want the auditor to be an outside person. I want our fit report to be done by somebody outside who says, no, this isn't good. I've been to other schools. This is not good.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. I just had some, I mean, it also talks a lot about tiles and things like that, and the floor and the carpeting, and I
You
know
can
that
get into
that's
the
not
weeds.
happening, exactly, so I just needed to understand it.
As I tell our folks, you can't bat an eye without seeing something to fix.
Well, there you go, okay.
So the consent agenda's been motion and a second.
Excuse me.
Any other discussion on the consent agenda? All in favor? Aye. Any nay? Passes. Item C, Charlie, approval of the 2017-18 final audit report. We've had the presentation. Any other discussion? Entertain a motion?
I'll move we approve item C.
I second it.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, approval of skipping criteria with shared seniority dates as presented.
Skipping criteria is if two people were hired at the same date, and if we were in a reduction mode, how would you make that decision? It sets the criteria for that, and it's very spelled out, and it's something we do every single year.
But it doesn't imply that you're looking to,
No.
you're not in a position for this right
No, but you have to have it in place in case you do the timeline. I'm trying to think of, is it March 15th? And then for CSEA, I believe it's 60 days before the end of the year.
now.
They have different time frames, but you have to have this in place as well.
Okay.
I hope we're not in that mode.
I just didn't remember seeing it before all the time.
Their last day.
Yeah.
Their
So
last
it's
day.
not done by fiscal year.
Yeah. That's right, it would be different if it were a year-round employee compared to a 180-day employee.
Okay, so entertain a motion for approval,
I move we approve item D.
and a second.
I second it.
Okay, motioned and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Okay, passes. We're item E, public hearing. Willits Unified School District Sunshine Proposal to WTA under Government Code 3547 requires that the proposal of the district to the WTA be presented in a public hearing to seek public input on the proposal. This process is called sunshining. Once this process is completed, negotiations can begin, and the Board of Trustees encourages public input.
It's a pretty straightforward thing. You put out items that you're interested in, and you make that a public notice of it. We certainly haven't gone into any major detail on that. We've had some board discussions about things we want to talk about, but we don't have plans written up or anything. We're just at the initial phase.
Okay, so, and did we list the items on the sunshine?
We will, at the item F, we will present. So this is just the public hearing part.
Okay, got it.
Give somebody the opportunity to say, I think you ought to talk about this in the public.
Got it, okay. So, any public comment about sunshine?
Have any public left? I've done it all in time.
With you over there?
More than usual.
Okay. So the public hearing's open. Do we actually close it?
We do.
Mhm.
So hearing no comments from the public, we'll close the public hearing. Adoption of the WSD sunshine proposal to WTA for contract negotiations. That's item F.
And we'll present this to Test Board, WTA.
And I did not see a copy in here.
That's what it was one of the items that I brought because we do not put it in the binder.
Got it, okay. That's it. So that's done. Now we'll go to public hearing for WSD sunshine proposal to CSEA under Government Code 3547.
We need to approve this.
You got a mail.
Oh, we gotta
We
approve
need
it?
to approve the proposal to WTA.
The adoption of the W.
The,
F?
it's
F or G?
F, item F, what I just presented to them, we need to approve,
Gotcha, okay, I'm sorry.
please.
So, entertain a motion.
Yeah, I move we approve item F.
And is there a second?
I can second.
Any discussion?
Yes, I have a question. When you put appendices on there, you're just discussing all the extra duty, extra pays, and the coaches and all the...
Right.
Okay.
And there are some of the appendices that have informational things like descriptions and kind of stuff with them.
Okay.
Okay. It's been motioned and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And passes. So now we're to item G, WTA Sunshine Proposal to WSD for contract negotiations.
This is, oh, okay. Yay.
This is kind of like the South Korea or North Korea American Summit, where you hand papers back and forth to each other and shake
Greetings,
hands.
members of the
Where's the
board.
little wall for us to step over?
Ms. Nunez, Ms. James, Ms. Bowles.
This is CSEA?
Okay.
No, WTA.
Mr. Westerberg.
So these two guys kind of go together.
Okay, so we're still on.
This, their
Oh,
Sunshine
we're on
Proposal
G.
to us.
We're on G then, okay.
I'm Robert Parmenter. I'm the lead negotiator for Willits Teachers Association. I'm wearing red tonight in support of Los Angeles teachers and Oakland teachers who are preparing to strike in order to achieve a more favorable contract. But back to the business at hand, I wish to sunshine articles. Do you have a copy of that? I'll stand over Mr. Westerberg's shoulder, I think, and just read
Oh,
them
you
off
need to
here.
read?
Oh, sure, thank you.
You can use it.
Okay. The Willits Teachers Association hereby notifies the Willits Unified School District of its intent to bargain a successor agreement to the current collective bargaining agreement. We wish to sunshine articles as follows. Article 4, Article 6, Article 7, Article 8, Article 9, 10, and 11, Article 13, Article 14, and Article 18. We reserve the right to open any and all articles for discussion until the completion of negotiations. We look forward to meeting, or rather setting some dates for negotiations as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got the original copy, huh?
We do.
All right.
Mr. Westerberg has the one with the yellow highlighting on it.
Oh,
That's the secret one.
all right. So other than accepting that, we don't need to take any action.
We take action accepting their.
No need for a motion. Should we do?
Yeah, I move we approve item G.
Second for that?
I do.
Okay, motion and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now we'll move on to item H. Public hearing, WUSD Sunshine Proposal to CSEA. Under Government Code 3547 requires that the proposal of the district to the CSEA be presented in a public hearing to seek public input on the proposal. The process is called sunshining once again. Once this process is completed, negotiations can begin. The Board of Trustees encourages public input. So the public hearing is open. Any public comment on item H? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and move on to item I.
We're going to close that?
Yep. Opened and closed, almost in the same breath. Adoption of the Willits Unified School District Sunshine Proposal to CSEA for contract negotiations.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Joanna. Well, that's too long.
I have a question about this too.
Go ahead with the question, Paul.
So when you present it like this, you are saying that the only thing you wish to discuss will be transportation issues? the district is presenting to the CSEA that the only thing you wish to open are transportation issues, right? So everything else in the contract, as far as the district is concerned, will not be discussed, or doesn't need to be discussed.
It's not required to discuss.
It's not required.
Because generally what happens is, just like Robert said in his presentation, that if both parties are open to a discussion about something, then you can talk about something else.
Okay.
But we're asking that this be talked about.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. A motion to approve
Just item I.
item I.
I move we approve item I.
I second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Okay. Item J, CSEA Sunshine Proposal to Willits Unified School District for contract negotiations.
I only have one copy here. I was going to give it to Mark because we actually gave copies in the file about 2.5 weeks ago, and I thought Mark might have included it in the pamphlet already.
We didn't know if we had to do it.
Dan, I can't do it until
Oh, okay.
this part, which is why it seems kind of funny.
I was told I have to wait for the official former paper exchange.
Okay, I can try to make some copies.
Thank you.
Any discussion on item J?
There's not, I've reviewed it. But you're more than welcome to take a look at it.
Yeah, it's the same thing we saw a couple weeks ago. Same thing we saw.
That's right. Make sure to get it back.
About the same. Might add some on the bottom, but it's negotiations. I'll entertain
So this is item J.
item J.
I move we approve item J.
I second it.
Seconded. Any further discussion? Essentially, the contracts are essentially wide open at this stage, for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a dying need to get into certain parts, that's why we don't sunshine.
Right.
But if we get into negotiations and it becomes attached to something, or if you do this, we'll do that issue, then certainly they can do it. We're not opposed to having a conversation about anything. This is basically done as a preparation thing, if nothing else, to let them know, this is the article we're looking at.
But theoretically, if you listed transportation, and the only thing Dan listed was transportation, the discussion would be limited to transportation.
Theoretically.
Okay.
But again, none of us go to the table, teachers or CSEA, with the mindset of, we don't have to talk about anything. It's usually, we'll talk about anything. So this isn't a...
Been motion is seconded on item J. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. We have items K through Q, acknowledgement of first reads on a variety of new policies. Take some time to read those. They're great things to help you sleep at night. And so we'll acknowledge that we've received those policies.
I had a question on L. You know, the one about athletic competition?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, so then my question, well, I have two of them really. One of them has to do with the part in there that, if I am not mistaken, I should look at it again, but anyway, about how the consequences for a violation of either the morals code or the ethics code, whatever, the code of conduct part. Okay, and then it says, well, it'll be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And I wondered, what is the district rationale for that? As opposed to, you know, you go to a party and you get drunk, let's say, then you don't get to play the next two games. But if somebody else goes to a party and they get drunk, they're going to be spoken to, but they won't miss any games. And I mean, to me, all that looked like was an easy way to discriminate against players. So I'd sort of like to see the flip side of that.
I think the rationale behind that is, I'll just give you some examples from my past history of being an athletic director and a principal. I had students who were at a party where there was drinking going on. They all three got cited for being at a party where there was alcohol. All three of them blew 0. None of them had been drinking, but they got cited for being at a party where there was alcohol. So if we just used the strict letter of our handbook in that case, they all would have lost 25% of their season just because they were there. We believe that they made a mistake being there, but we also wanted to acknowledge the fact that they were smart enough not to be drinking underage drinking. And so we instituted a different penalty for that than if they had been drinking. It's very difficult to write a handbook that's going to cover every single incident. Even in high school handbooks, if you're talking about discipline, the best discipline code sets a range in there. That, because the range could be based on you got sent down 4 times, or this was really dramatic, this wasn't dramatic. The same thing happens with conduct violations. You know, if a student gets sent out of class, sometimes it's they need to be cooled off, sometimes they're really inappropriate. And so when do you sit them? I've not run into a case where our coaches or extracurricular people are unwilling to discipline and discipline fairly, because they still have to do it through the principal and the athletic director. It's not a random, it's not just, well, this coach wants to do this coach wants to do that. So they try to be fair about it. My advice is, if you want to make a handbook that's really restrictive and says, this is it, these are the consequences, be prepared to have a lot of cases that are gray and lots of discussion meetings back there about how to sort them out. I don't know. It's just not, I find it much more valuable to have a range and to have consistency. And one of the appeal processes is me. And so I always make a very solid point of fair and consistent. What's past practice? What's happened before? What was the intent? How many times has a student athlete done this? So there is an appeal process to it.
Okay, I didn't really notice that, and that was going to be my next thing.
Yeah, it's an appeal process that is done by the principal and the athletic director. They can appeal it to me. In fact, if they don't like my decision, they actually can come to a board. It has to be a closed session because obviously it's about a student. But they can appeal it to the board.
Oh, okay, I didn't seem to notice that part.
But this is not, these discipline, when we're talking about this kind of discipline, it's not handed down by one individual either. This is discussed between the principal, the athletic director, the coaches, possibly some teachers involved. There's not just one person making a decision.
Oh, okay.
And there's some pretty steadfast rules. So if Claire misbehaves and she gets suspended tomorrow and they have a game, she can't play in the game.
Right. Well, I know the athletes. Oh, okay. Well, I understood they all signed code of conduct rules, and theoretically you abided by them, but I know that there are instances where that didn't always happen, and certainly they were past ones. I'm just curious as to how this covers those kinds of, they were pretty gross mistakes in the past. And
the other thing I don't really want to do, Paula, is I don't want to, I'll give you an example, that there are some coaches who run a really tight ship and have additional rules in their conduct.
Well, yeah.
And there are other coaches who don't, and part of the reason they don't, and I'll give you a really good example. John in volleyball is very tight with everything. Okay? That's part of his nature about who he is. But he's very tight about that. However, track is a different story. Because track, you're begging them to come out and run. And it's a little more loose, and it's a little more, well, okay, I know you're playing baseball, but I want you to come and run. Well, if they get in trouble in baseball, do they get in trouble in track? There's sometimes some gray area. Okay. I don't like a coach to be painted in the corner about this is the book and that's all we do. Because we really deal with kids, and kids are not always the definition.
Exactly.
Most of the time, they're a shade of gray somewhere.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what I hope we have in place.
Oh, okay.
I hope we have common sense with a sense of appeal to me
Yeah.
and appeal to a board if they don't like my decision.
Okay. No, that's good, thanks. I didn't know it went through that many people in the first place either, or
Any
the
other-
appeal, so.
Any
thanks.
other comments on the first reads?
Nope.
It's Willits. It usually goes through that process in about a minute and a half on
Okay.
Facebook.
That or throughout this grocery store, but.
Is this gonna be a change to the code of conduct at Willits High School?
It will probably not be reflected until the fall though, because the handbooks have already been out. Generally speaking, athletes get a code of conduct and they sign their athletic form once a year. You know, you've already been in a couple sports, so
Yeah.
you've already signed yours. And so generally, it's usually a September thing.
Public comment on items that are not on the agenda? And I think we've lost pretty much the public. And anybody got anything they're interested in seeing on the next regular meeting?
We missed an
Item
item.
R.
We missed item R.
Oh, that's right, we added on.
We added one.
So
You want to talk about R, Mark?
I'll let Mark.
Have our-
Oh.
This is for the
Yeah.
the days we were closed through
Yeah,
this month.
I'm requesting from the state that they, in short, grant us a freebie for our air quality day.
I'm
we
sure we're
had
not
a-
alone.
Hmm?
We're not alone.
No. Although we do have a day in March that they could come back and say, well, that's why you gotta use your day in March. Well, we don't wanna roll the dice and figure out what's gonna happen, because if we have another snow day, ice day, flood day, whatever, I think that was a legitimate closure based on a unique circumstance. Everyone around us closed, and we closed on a Friday because we had the whole weekend. And on top of that, districts were closed Monday and Tuesday in Ukiah.
Yeah.
We happen to be right on that borderline just because we're a little bit higher up the grade where it wasn't quite as bad.
So I
But,
think it's Sacramento and the
Yeah.
area, there's a lot of.
yeah.
So this is essentially, we're requesting that the state not penalize us under ADA for that day.
Right, and not force us to use the March 15 day. Because that's designed for snow, ice, unusual conditions, that we still want to keep that in place. I mean, it's early January.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve item number R. It's the one we added to the agenda.
I move we approve item R.
I second it.
Then we approve, and the motion is seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving item R?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And passes. Now we're down to the real best part of this meeting. If you guys have any agenda items, please give either Mark or me a call, and I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Come on, Paul, you want to get in a minute?
I know. I was in the minutes. Oh, you mean to ask for an adjournment?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, please. I move that we please adjourn.
There you go.
There we are, yeah.
See, now you're in a minute.
Now I'm gonna, oh, I think I seconded something.
All in favor? Aye.
Excuse me.
Thanks, everybody.